In order for me to cheat against you, I have to know what the engine is telling me in this position. And it's so much easier for me to know that because I have some device somewhere on my body that all I have to do is receive that information from somebody externally. If I have to input the move that you have played into a device and do it accurately every single move of the game without you noticing or without anyone else noticing and while cameras are running, I'm not going to claim that's impossible, but that's very, very, very hard to do. While it'd be pretty darn easy to have some device that, vibrates or buzzes or does something.
So you grew up in Berkeley, right? Or in the area?
Yeah, so I was born in San Francisco, but I lived in Berkeley from age like 0 to 4. Then my parents moved to Orenda. Spent the rest of my youth in Orenda. I did 4 years of undergrad in Waltham, Massachusetts when I was at Brandeis, and then from age like 22 onwards now, I moved back in with my parents for 1 year after college, and then when I was 24, I bought my home in Walnut Creek and been in Walnut Creek ever since.
At what age did you learn chess? Was that like early on or?
So I first learned how to move the pieces reasonably young, probably when I was like 6 or 7, but I didn't think much of the game. I never like really took it seriously. It was only when I was like 9 or so that I took my first after school chess class with the Berkeley Chess School, and they're the ones who fostered my early developments, and I only started playing tournaments like just before I turned 12.
Was there something that changed between that time that made you want to pick it up, or was it?
No, I guess I just picked it up once, didn't think much of it. Then when I played it again, I enjoyed it. And also, I mean, the first time I played it was only really with my dad, who I guess I enjoyed playing with. But, when there was one kid at the school he was the best kid in the school, and everyone knew that. And then I just came in to the chess club, beat him in like 15 moves. And, then I guess I realized I enjoyed it more. I think as human beings, I think we're sort of predisposed to like things we're good at.
What opportunities, like in the Bay Area specifically, do you think helped foster your early chess career?
Well, I had a lot. So first of all, when I was growing up, really for the most part, chess in America was a barren wasteland. There was very little opportunity for professional development. Now, by American standards, the Bay Area was fantastic. We had the Berkeley Chess School, which fostered my early development. They taught me some of the very basics. I wouldn't even say they even taught me that much to become that good at chess, but they really cultivated my love for the game and my love for competition, which was a huge part of getting into it because I was doing other stuff. I was playing basketball and baseball and soccer. Ultimately, chess is what I ended up spending most of my time on. Then I spent a lot of time going to the Mechanics Institute and the now defunct East Bay Chess Club, where when I was at the East Bay Chess Club as well, I got to hang out and take lessons from 3 players, David Bruce, Vinay Bhatt, and Josh Friedel, who were all incredibly helpful for my development. And the time since then, since I've become like a world's leading grandmaster, these places have really been my number one cheering section, which has just been fantastic to know that you have the support of your hometown behind you. And I've done everything I can to give back. I play simuls, I teach classes, I do what I can.
So at what point did you decide or maybe realize that you could make playing chess a career?
Well, I had sort of known for a long time that that's sort of what I wanted to do. The real question wasn't whether I wanted to, whether I could. And I was in college. I finished undergrad at Brandeis, but I guess the moment that I really knew that chess was my top priority was when, in my junior year of college, I was invited to make my debut for the United States Olympic team during final exams. And I said yes before asking my professors for permission. And at that point, I understood that chess was first and school was second.
So I think I saw an interview where you said that you don't feel like chess has necessarily been a natural ability for you and that it's mostly been hard work?
Well, that may appear disingenuous because I think if you just took me compared to your average human being, I think I'm a phenomenally talented chess player. But by the rarefied standards of the absolute elite of the world, I think I'm not a talented chess player. I mean, I guess these are totally random numbers, but imagine I'm the kind of talent you might see once every 100,000 people. That might sound amazing, but it's a really big world. And, when you're playing with people who are much stronger than that and much more natural, who are much more naturally talented than you are, you're aware of it. Now, one thing I like about chess is I don't think that talent is the most important element. I think your choices matter a lot more. And I've never really perceived my lack of talent compared to some of the players I've played against as any serious detriment. I can list a ton of people who I think are more talented than me who've had much less successful careers.
So would you say that the majority of top-level chess players are coming from a place of more talent?
Yeah, I think possibly even all of them. Like, I think if you look at the players above me in the rating list, it's very possible 100% of them are more talented than me. I'm not claiming they haven't worked hard. Nobody gets to their level or my level without working hard too. But in general, I don't think that talent is as important in chess as people bring it out to be.
In your early chess career, I guess in 2010 you played the U.S. Junior Championship.
Yeah.
And that was the tournament where you lost your first two and then went on
Yeah.
to win the whole thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was funny. I was on my way out of chess at that point. I was very frustrated. I had gotten a lot of bad luck. So, for example, you need 3 norms to become a grandmaster, and I had something like 6, but like 4 of them didn't count for sort of frivolous technical reasons. And there's no doubt that this was not fair, but of all the injustices that could befall a human being, it was pretty darn trivial. I did not see it that way at the time, and I basically thought, oh, this is horrible. I try everything I can to be a grandmaster. I play well enough to get it, and then some stupid crap steals it from me. I sort of saw myself as a victim. And again, I mean, I guess technically I sort of was, but again, like, life sucks. There's going to be so many unfair things that are going to happen to you sometimes, and this was just really, really trivial, and I was very spoiled. And so coming into the U.S. Junior, I was already in a horrible mood, and then I lost those first 2 games, and I was really thinking I'm on my way out of chess at that point. College was about to start, and I also didn't. After that, I didn't even play for 9 months. But it's, I guess, just things clicked at the right time. I think somehow after those 2 games, and I just realized, well, I don't care anymore. It's not a. I mean, I'm not going to win this tournament. It's just not a. Probably not even going to play chess anymore. And I just stopped caring so much, and I stopped putting so much pressure. All of a sudden, I was able to play without that pressure and bring my best. And then at that point, I was just far and away the best junior in the country, and I showed it in the remaining rounds.
So would you say that that's a theme, that when you face a setback, maybe in a particular difficult loss, that the ability to not care about it so much is what propels you forward?
Yeah, I mean, you have to have a certain amount of, you have to care the right amount. If you don't care at all when you lose, if it doesn't hurt you at all, you're not going to be motivated to not let it happen again. And you're not going to become a great chess player as a result. But if it hurts you so much that you're just like, oh, I can't believe I don't want to play this game anymore, it has to hurt you the right amount. And I think if you talk about, for example, if you want to talk about that concept of talent, well, I don't think I might be naturally talented, and like, here's the board, I can just see naturally what the best move is in a way that other people can't. I think I've had a very good feel psychologically for how to cope with pressure and how to deal with high stress scenarios. And that showed like long before I was even a chess player. I was always a good baseball player, but never a great one, for example. And there were always kids on the team that were like better pitchers than me. But the coach knew exactly when to put me into pitch, which was when we're down by 3 runs, the bases are loaded, there's no outs, and the pitcher is crying. That's when you bring me in. Now, I might not be the best pitcher in general, but like when the tense moments happen, I was always good at that. And I think that helps a lot in chess.
Would you say that that's something that your coaches in chess, maybe like in Olympiads or team events, have also noticed?
Yeah, I mean, in Olympiads and team events, I've had very good results. I had a lousy Olympiad this year. That was my first ever bad result playing for the U.S. flag, actually. And many World Team Championships and Olympiads and Pan Americans in our match with China. Like, it's, yeah, I think they've noticed that I generally don't crumble. Like, there's some people where they're just brilliant chess players, but if things start going wrong, it's just an avalanche until the tournament's over. And I've had maybe 1 or 2 tournaments in my life like that, while some people have 1 or 2 a year.
There was this game, I think in Tata Steel 2019 with the Nishikori, the one where you resigned the drawn position. And then also, more recently, there was this game in the Olympiad where there was the sort of touch move.
Yeah, where I hallucinated. That was the first game I ever lost with my eyes, not with my brain.
What would your advice be to players when you have something sort of devastating like this happen? How do you come back and play your best chess?
Have to remember that every game is independent of anything that came before it. And I can tell you, I'm not sure these exact words would apply to most people, in fact, just about anybody. But after I lost that game to Anish, where I resigned the drawn position, I mean, I was just devastated. But I remember I got back to my hotel room and I looked at myself in the mirror and I said, you are 27 years old and you are the U.S. champion and you are not going to go cry in the corner because you had a bad day. Then I came back and beat Nepomniachtchi and Kramnik in the final 2 games. And particularly the game with Nepomniachtchi, I think one of the biggest reasons I won that was he completely underestimated my ability to bounce back. He did something extremely provocative very early in the game, clearly trying to beat me with the black pieces when that might not have been the most prudent thing, and maybe something he would not have done if that hadn't happened the previous day. I think it's very possible he was thinking, this guy's hurting and I have to hit him while he's down, and I can. And I think he was completely unprepared for how well I was going to bounce back. But yeah, as for the Olympiad, again, I finished the tournament reasonably well after that disaster. I guess in general, I'm good at, you lose enough games, you get good at coming back from losses.
So do you prefer to play against players who maybe underestimate you?
I prefer to play against players who will do stupid stuff. And if underestimating me will provoke them into doing stupid things, then yes, I would prefer that. If they underestimate me, but that doesn't affect the way they play the game, I don't really care. But I like it when people make incorrect decisions. Let's put it that way.
How does your preparation, both in the chess and then also just in your day-to-day life, how does that vary from tournament to tournament or player to player?
Well, so there's basically three facets of preparation. One is chess playing ability, which comes down to, for example, lots of stuff like this. I don't know if your camera will catch it, but I've got these exercises here that I work on. My coach gives them to me, and I just solve them. I try to do one sheet per day, and I'll give myself usually 45 minutes on the clock to solve 6 positions and then go over the solutions. So that's the kind of thing that I would do to try to increase my skill as a chess player. But there's 2 elements of being good at chess. One is skill and the other is knowledge. And then the other thing is knowledge is much easier to transfer from one human being to another than skill is. For example, if there's something in this book that I didn't know and now I read it, now I know it. But that's not the same as transferring skill. Skill is, can you solve this position? And if you can't, you need to be better at solving positions. And that's not something that someone can just tell you how to do. And so that's constant training. But for the most part, I focus on the skill elements, like really trying to do calculation work a lot in the general time I have for training. And then as tournaments approach and become much closer, I will transition more towards openings, which is more about knowledge. And that also has a heavy recency bias. And while the skill-based approach stuff you want to be doing all the time, this stuff, it's much more important to do it very shortly before the tournament begins. And then finally, there's the physical psychological element, which is that I try to make sure I'm in very good physical shape, which is, of course, harder to do now that I'm about to be 31 than it was when I was 20. But I do my best. I made a little point system for myself where, I get 10 points for walking a mile. I get 1 point for a pull-up, 3 points for a weighted pull-up, 1 point for every 3 push-ups, like all sorts of things. And I do my best to make sure I get over 100 points every day. I also have, minus 50 points for an alcoholic beverage, minus 100 points for a dessert or for a soda, things like this. So I do a lot of stuff, not just restricted to the game itself, also restricted to health and conditioning. And, well, it's working for me pretty well.
So you worked on Magnus's team in the 2014 and 2016 World Championships. And then you also worked with Hikaru in the most recent candidates?
Yes.
How is it similar or different to preparing for your own games?
Honestly, it's almost exactly the same as far as I'm concerned. The only difference is that if they don't like what I do, it's basically like somebody has veto power. And if they say, I don't like this analysis you've done, and I can't explain why, but I just don't want to play it, then you have to respect that. And that's a position that I'm used to being in myself, because when I go to tournaments, for the most part, it's usually other people helping me. I have people who help me during my tournaments and stuff. And there have been plenty of times where I've just said, yeah, this might work, but I'm sorry, I don't want to do it. I don't like the feel of that. And I can get that it would be frustrating for them to hear that. And it was certainly a little frustrating for me when I would hear that from Magnus or Hikaru. But for the most part, basically, I just said, here's a bunch of ideas that I think I would want to try. And these are priorities in order of how good I think they are. And then they will do with them what they can. And sometimes they work and sometimes they don't. But I think they both saw something in my analytical skills that they wanted to use. And I guess I just hope I did a good enough job to satisfy them. I mean, they played well in the events where I was helping them.
Do you feel the same level of fulfillment when a player that you're working with wins a game versus when you win?
No. So that distinguishes often that's often the difference between a great coach and a great player. Players tend to be much more motivated by their own success. You have to have some base level of selfishness to be a good chess player, and I have that in spades. But I definitely am much more motivated by my own successes. And honestly, one of the biggest reasons I even worked for Hikaru or Magnus in the first place was just so that I could work with other members of their team. And, when they're done with this analysis, whatever they didn't use, which will easily be 90+% of it, I'll be able to play myself. I won't complain about getting paid for the time I spent with them. But really the main thing was, well, I'll just do a whole bunch of analysis that I'll get to use myself someday. And if you get to use a little bit of it first, that's good for you. But yeah, I'm much more motivated by my own successes. But I wouldn't say I'm unhappy to see them win. I certainly am. It's just not my main motivation.
You won the U.S. Championship in 2019 and 2018.
Yeah.
And you're about to return to the U.S. Championship.
Yeah.
How do you think your chances of winning are this year? And is there anything you're trying to replicate from the year that you won?
The year I won, I just played probably not the best chess in my life, but close, and I got really lucky at the same time. I don't know. I think any given U.S. Championship, my odds of winning are probably somewhere between 10 and 15%. I don't really think there's anyone with much higher chances. I don't know. I mean, Wesley is the highest rated player and the defending champion. If my odds are 10%, maybe his are 13. I don't think any individual player has a wildly high shot, but stranger things could happen than me winning. I think, if this will be like my 13th U.S. Championship, and my first few, I was like really at the bottom of the field, and I think I've won about the amount you would expect from me, based on how good I am and how many times I've tried. Coming in, I just want to do my best to play my best chess. If I come in and play my absolute best, honestly, I probably still won't win. But if I play my absolute best and get a little bit lucky, then yeah, I'm going to win.
Do you feel like that you've peaked in terms of your playing ability, or do you think it's still on the rise?
It's hard to tell. I certainly hope not. I mean, my peak rating was 2731, which put me at, I believe, number 21 in the world, and I'm now 2712, which is a drop. I mean, I had a horrible year in 2019 for a lot of reasons, which saw me drop way, way, way lower than that, and I've since recovered from that. But it's possible that that was the highlight, and I'm never gonna get to that level again. But I'd like to think it's not the case. I do believe I'm a stronger player now than I was then. I was getting luckier then than I am now, which is a big part of it in the short run. But I think that I can get stronger, and I'm hopeful I can be better than that.
So from writing 2 books on chess and making, I think, 3 Chessable courses?
No, it's 8.
8, wow. Yeah. So you've done a lot of chess education. Do you feel like teaching a chess has any effect on your strength to play?
Yeah, so basically it's about what I teach. I basically don't teach anybody, so to speak. My style of teaching is I want to learn about chess. This is a thing I want to learn about, so I'll just study it and write a book about it. And if you want to learn about it too, you're welcome to come along for the ride. It sounds very selfish inherently in its nature, and I guess to some extent it is, but I've also found it's also extremely popular, and people really like just sort of coming along with me for my normal training, so to speak. I have never written a book about a topic I wasn't interested in researching. I don't think I ever will. I'm currently working on my 3rd theoretical rook endgames, and it's because I wanted to research it, not because I was trying to make money or anything like that.
When you're teaching about opening theory and things like that, is there anything that you ever have to withhold in order to keep your own ideas secret?
Not really, no. So all of this analysis that I did for Chessable and these repertoires that I've made, I definitely recommended the best stuff to the best of my ability in these particular lines. And so what I've basically done is I think they're very good lines that I've given, but they're not the only good lines you can choose. And so in games where my opponents will have a lot of time to prepare for me, like for example in this upcoming U.S. Championship where we'll get our pairings the day before the tournament starts for the whole event, and then they'll have overnight to look at my stuff. I probably won't necessarily repeat that much stuff from these Chessable courses there, because I'd be a little bit worried about just publishing my best work in the open and then letting the best players in the world have a crack at it. But for example, if I'm playing a rapid tournament where we're playing 5 games in one day or something, I'll absolutely play this analysis. I can, and I have, and I've done it many times. And even in classical games, I've actually played it a little bit. My strategy has been, I want to play this analysis enough that it will force my opponents to actually spend their time looking at it and have it tax their preparation time, but not so much that they're actually going to be able to use it that often.
Do you notice when other players are using some of your work in their games?
Absolutely. So I do a little bit of work with our new youngest grandmaster, Abhimanyu Mishra from New Jersey. And long before we started working together, I was watching his games from various tournaments and noticing he was just playing literally every single game. He was just playing my repertoire when he was playing white, and he was just killing everybody for like a couple of years, which was really awesome to watch. I felt really happy about that. I didn't know the kid at all back then, but I was immediately a big fan. And since then, he's pivoted because, as time passes, we always have to pivot. Whatever I publish then, I still think is good now, but it's not going to be as good now as it was when it first came out. There'll be less novelty to it, less surprise, but I definitely notice when people are playing my recommendations.
Online chess has exploded in the last few years, and this has brought in like a pretty big new generation of amateur players. Do you see this change as an overall benefit to professional chess?
Absolutely. If you think about it, if there was Armageddon tomorrow, all the chess players, all the athletes, all the entertainers, we would be like immediately useless. We don't do anything that helps society function, so to speak. What we do is provide entertainment for people. People who love this game want to watch us play, the same as any athlete. And if there's just no interest in watching us play, professional chess dies. And so having a huge amount of people that are interested in the game and following along at an amateur level and enjoying the game and watching us play and enjoying watching us play and meeting their heroes and stuff, if those people just didn't exist, we wouldn't have a game. And having a whole lot more of them, I'm all for it.
Have you noticed a difference in maybe in the number of spectators or how often you get recognized?
How often I get recognized, I'm not sure. Maybe that's still relatively rare. If I'm like just walking down the street or go to a restaurant, I'd say maybe like one time in 50 I'm recognized, which is not wildly common. It does happen. But yeah, I mean, I definitely have noticed that viewership, mostly online viewership, has really gone up in recent times, I guess.
With recent developments, it's been hard to talk about chess without talking about cheating in chess. Recently, Magnus Carlsen has been insinuating that he believes Hans Niemann has cheated against him. Do you think that cheating is a threat to professional chess?
It absolutely is. And first of all, I have to say, I think I've had an unbelievably lucky and blessed career because I actually believe that I have never once been cheated against in an over-the-board classical game. I believe literally every single game I've ever played has been clean. Speaking with my friends, my peers, my colleagues, my students, nobody else has had that experience. Like literally nobody. Everybody has had games where, even if they didn't get cheated against, they're suspicious or they think they might have been cheated. And for me, it just has never happened. Cheating is an absolute disaster whenever it happens. And the real problem that we're facing is that it is very hard to straddle anti-cheating measures with both things that are economically responsible and viable, as well as spectator friendly. So for example, if you were to have a tournament and say, all right, no spectators allowed at all, we're going to jam all the transmissions. We're going to have the broadcast be 30 minutes delayed. Every single player is going to be searched head to toe in a separate room, and with very thorough wanding. And you have to come to the games an hour early because every single player has to be searched. I have no doubt in my mind that there would be no cheating in such an event. But then the question becomes, is this a cost that we are willing to pay? Because no spectators, and then no spectators, we're not going to get as much income coming in from the tournament. Sponsors are going to be less happy. If we have to hire a whole ton of security personnel, that's more expenses. And ultimately, the ones that are going to ultimately pay this are the players. Our prize funds are going to be lower when we have fewer people watching. We have more security. It's a balance that you have to strike. And I think in elite chess, as far as I know, there aren't really. At least what I'll say is in my tournaments, I don't believe I've ever been cheated. Or in tournaments where I've played in, at least closed events, I don't believe there's ever been any cheating. I do think a balance can be struck. I think for the moment that balance has shifted a little bit too far towards we trust everybody. And so I do think that the most basic thing you can do is have a delay from the time the games are played to the broadcast. That just solves so many problems because if we were to fundamentally cheat, if you and I are sitting at this board right now and we're playing our game, in order for me to cheat against you, I have to know what the engine is telling me in this position. And it's so much easier for me to know that because I have some device somewhere on my body that all I have to do is receive that information from somebody externally. If I have to input the move that you have played into a device and do it accurately every single move of the game without you noticing or without anyone else noticing and while cameras are running, I'm not going to claim that's impossible, but that's very, very, very hard to do. While it'd be pretty darn easy to have some device that, vibrates or buzzes or does something. So as long as somebody else is doing the inputting and all you have to do is read the output, I think cheating becomes a lot easier. And if you introduce a 15-minute delay, the only real way someone could effectively cheat is if they're doing the inputting themselves. And I'm not going to say it can't be done, but it's so much harder. The barrier is going to be much higher.
Do you think that the recent controversy around cheating between Magnus and Hans has brought the right kind of attention to cheating in chess?
It has brought the right kind of attention to cheating in chess, but I don't like that we need some huge, massive controversy to get mainstream attention, from, Colbert and Trevor Noah and Elon Musk doing their thing. It's sad for me that the only time that we're noticed in the mainstream to that effect is when there's some massive controversy or something going down. And I would have much preferred if we got that attention for something more positive.
From issues like cheating to diversity in chess, it seems the chess world is facing a number of issues that might be limiting its growth. How do you see the game of chess changing in the next several decades?
What do you mean by issues of diversity in chess? Because as far as my experience has been, chess is for absolutely everybody. I've seen young, old, black, white, male, female, like literally everybody, you name it, plays chess. What do you mean by issues in diversity?
I guess I was thinking sort of the underrepresentation of women in top level chess.
Yeah, so that's a little different. It's a phenomenon that we've been seeing for a long time, both in terms of them being underrepresented in terms of the total pool of players, as well as top women's tournaments being a much lower level than top open tournaments. I think you can ask 20 smart people who know a lot about chess about this thing, and you'll get 20 very different answers. In general, I've always sort of been a little bit critical of the idea that women should be competing separately. I mean, if I'm looking at my own experience with my own female family members who've shown excellence in what they do, I certainly don't believe that fundamentally women should be worse at chess than men, which is sort of the only way I would justify having them in a separate division. I know people who would disagree with me and who are not sexist in any way and don't think women are dumb, but who would disagree with me and say women do need their own division, or would say that they face challenges in the chess world that men don't. That may well be true, but I still don't think you're ever going to see women play at the same level as men if they're not challenging themselves in the same ways by playing with the absolute best players. But it's hard to know. I have obviously a lot of knowledge of what makes a great chess player, but I've never lived my life as a woman. I can only speak to my own experience as a chess player, and I know that women I've talked to have told me that their experiences have been different than mine. Ultimately, I like the idea of open chess. I like the idea that chess is for everybody and that we're all competing in the same event, under the same roof. And, apart from specific national championships and national teams, I wouldn't love it if all of a sudden the U.S. championship wasn't only U.S. players, let's say. But for the most part, I hope that chess is not an exclusive game and that everybody is welcome.
What do you think the biggest misconception that the public has about chess?
Well, I think what was a misconception before was that top chess players were a bunch of nerdy dudes with massive glasses and weird talking and tiny shoulders and robotic voices, and when the best chess players in the world are just athletic young men. They're poised and polished. They're very well paid. They're very well put together. They're just top professionals. They're top athletes. And that's certainly become more of the perception that we see today when, especially as people like Magnus when Magnus has been as famous as he is, and he clearly is not some old dork, he's a top athlete. I mean, he even did some modeling at some point, and, it's as well as the portrayal of Beth Harmon in The Queen's Gambit. I think people don't see it as a nerdy game as much anymore, but I guess that is a misconception that some people may still have.
How would you describe to a non-chess player what makes chess so unique compared to maybe another board game?
So it's hard for me to tell about specifically compared to other board games because I haven't really played them. But my sense is that there's a lot of games that I would say are games, and there are a lot that I would say are sports. And there's very few things in the world that I would say are both sport and game, and chess is one of them. And to me, sport is something that really is not wildly accessible to certain people. You're 80 years old. I mean, I'm not claiming you can't ride your bicycle, but you're really going to go sign up for a basketball team? I mean, I'm sure it's happening somewhere, but it's just not the same. And chess, it's just it's really for everybody. It's a sport where you can see, 8-year-olds and 80-year-olds competing in the same way. And most sports you're going to see are just forced to be segregated by gender, for example, and forced to be segregated by age. And there are some chess tournaments that are like that, but in theory, I think there's no reason, most chess tournaments that you'll see do not have any limits on how old you can be or how young you can be or male or female. It's one of the very few sports where you can literally have an event that absolutely everybody is welcome to play. While, most sports are going to have very, very serious divisional differences.
Players like Mikhail Tal were known for their creative attacking chess, whereas we have players like Karpov who are known for their positional chess. With that in mind, how would you hope to be remembered as a chess player?
Well, I think what I would say most about my style is I'm relatively universal and a hard worker. I don't have sort of natural creativity and brilliance the same way that someone like Tall does, or in more modern times, if you're to talk about the most creative player, I'd probably say it's Richard Rapport. I don't have that kind of natural creative brilliance. There's very few phases of the game that I think I'm amazing at. I don't really think I'm amazing at anything, but I also don't think I'm really bad at anything. I'm a guy who's worked very hard, is very hard to beat. I make a fair amount of draws just because I'm very solid, but like I'm sort of an all-around player, good at everything, not great at almost anything, but I hope people just remember me as a hard worker and a universal player, I would say.
Do you have some favorite chess games, maybe from past players or more recent times?
Yeah, so there's several that I would really like. So, for example, of the current world champion, my two favorite Magnus games were one, his win over Boris Gelfand from the candidates. I think it was 2012. The only candidates he played, basically. The one he played with, the game he played with White. There was this fantastic moment where he played b4 and had to calculate a lot of really interesting variations to justify a small positional goal. Another game of his that I really liked was his game with Luke McShane. I forget what year, but it was from the London Chess Classic, where he got this queen and rook position where he was a pawn down, and I remember that game was the one that convinced that he would be a world champion. I just took one look at it when I was following it live, and I said, all right, 28-30 or not, you're not saving this position. This is dead lost. And not only did he save it, he made it look easy. And he just showed this phenomenal understanding of how to defend the position, understanding that the queen trade was what he wanted to do, but also he could only trade the queens without allowing the pawn structure to be changed. And it really was a great game. There have been other great games. Of course, Nigel Short's famous king walk up to h6. I think a lot of people will know that one. But yeah, there's been quite some games that I've really liked. I always teach this this game between Boris Avruk and Anatoly Weizlever it's a almost unknown game from the Israeli Team Championship 2002 that I thought was fantastic as well.
Yeah, one of my favorites of all time is Kasa Corley versus Alexander Moisenko.
Oh yeah, this knight takes h3 check.
Yeah.
I know this one.
Yeah, and then the rook e5 is just amazing.
The Shirov game, or
no, in the Kasa Corley game.
Oh yeah, where he played rook e5.
Yeah.
I mean, knight h3 was
probably the main.
Yeah, knight fe4, knight h3. But yeah, that one was great.
Yeah, really amazing. In that same vein, who do you feel is the greatest chess player of all time, if there is one?
I mean, it's not that I don't like Magnus, but I will say it pains me to say I do think it's him. I wish I could say Kasparov. I really wish I could, but given how dominant Magnus has been for so many years, I don't think you can really make a case it's not him.
Do you think that you can compare chess ability across eras, like between Fischer, Kasparov?
I mean, you can. It just doesn't seem fair. The natural progression of any sport is that every generation is going to be better than the one that preceded it. I remember how good I was when I was, 18, 19, and comparing that to, the Arjun Erigases of the world today is just ridiculous. Like, they're so much better now than we were then, and I have no doubt whatsoever that the next generation will be better than we are now, and we're better than the generation that came before us. And if you look at the absolute best players of all time, the best ones were only ever like one generation ahead of their time. So, for example, Fischer was one generation ahead of his time. He was world champion, and then when he gave the title, I'll make the case that Karpov was a worse player than Fischer was when they were at their best. And even though Fischer came first, he was still the better player. But that was one generation. And then Kasparov came along, and I think Kasparov was stronger. And then Kasparov was also similar brilliant in that he was a generation out of his time. I think he was better than Vichy and he was better than Kramnik, but he was not better than Magnus. Like, basically I've only ever seen anyone be so good that they were one generation ahead of their time. I've never seen anybody two generations ahead.
So you mentioned Arjun Erigaisi. We have a lot of these young chess players coming out, especially out of India. Are there any young U.S. players that you're keeping your eye on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I've been working off and on with Christopher Yu, who has made incredible progress. I've also worked off and on with Abhimanyu Mishra, so I certainly know them the best just because I've spent some time and worked with them, and I see how dedicated they are and how strong I think they're going to be. So those would be the two names that I would be watching from this like really young generation. But of course, I'm somewhat biased in that, and that these are people I've worked with. There's plenty of strong young Americans who I don't know so well, but again, I just don't really know them.
So when you visualize in chess, I know a lot of people that don't play chess kind of have a hard time understanding what this means. What do you see in your mind? Is there like a specific piece set or board, or is it more of an abstraction?
I don't know. I mean, like when I'm looking at this board, for example, and I sit down and start calculating, I will I can sort of visualize the pieces moving around a little bit, but usually if I'm like calculating deeply, I'll either be staring intensely at the board or blindfolding myself in some way, staring into space or just closing my eyes. But, I can keep the position in my head pretty well.
Do you feel that your play is at all affected by outside factors such as, anywhere from the pieces to spectators that might be distracting or your opponent?
So I think I'm very, very good at that in general. I mean, there's a lot of players where you can see like there's a huge difference between them at their best and them at their worst. And I'm not saying there's no difference for me, but there's less of a difference than others. And so I'm usually on pretty good form. I take very good care of myself physically. I make very strict schedule during tournaments sleeping, involving what time I sleep, what time I eat, how much I eat, how many calories, what I'm exactly eating before a game, things like that. So I find I'm relatively impervious to surroundings. And when I'm like really calculating, like straight, like zoned in, you can't distract me. I literally had to have somebody grab me and physically shake me and pull me away from the board. Sam, the fire alarm is going off. We have to leave. Like, I didn't hear the fire alarm. That was pretty bad.
Have you ever tried playing with like one of these heart rate monitor tournaments?
No, I haven't done one of those yet.
Yeah, I've heard that Magnus's heart rate when he plays a game is just completely flat.
Yeah, I don't think that would be me, but there's a difference in having a flat heart rate and not letting outside disturbances annoy you.
Gotcha. Cool. Okay, I think that was all the questions that I have. Is there anything else you want the Berkeley community to know about the game of chess?
No, I mean, I hopefully this gave them a pretty good intro. I guess the last things I would say is it's an absolutely amazing game. I encourage you to play. It is for absolutely everybody. There's no such thing as too young or too old. And I'd also just like to, for the players of the Berkeley and Bay Area community who have been following me and supporting me for all these years, I'd just like to say a huge thank you. It's, having the support is what keeps me going.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think that wraps up the interview.
My pleasure.